Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:08 p.m. Central. Mercury retrograde crushing our brains and the grinder mix. That's what it feels like. Of course, I don't try to go on about that too much. I used to have a fellow that I worked with, Dan Murakami. Dan was Japanese and American, and he used to tune instruments for Steely Dan. And you can find his name probably on some CDs or something. But anyway, he worked at Petco with me, and he'd always go, Jeffrey, it's Mercury retrograde. And his voice, he was a very intense person, but for some reason I remember him. I've been trying to find him because he loaned me some X Files. I gave them back to him, but he would laugh so much if he knew what I did now with the paranormal radio and everything. Because he loaned me all the X Files for the first time, and if he knew that I was doing this, he's very private, so it's hard to get a hold of him or find him or whatever. Or I can't, but he would laugh at the irony that he loaned me those so long ago, and now I've been doing this for 13 years. The X Files, baby, UFOs and occult and all the other craziness in the world. Well, Ralph Tegtmeier, it's great to have you here. First off, did I say your name correctly? Say it for us.
Perfectly, and thanks for the
Tegtmeier.
invitation. Glad to be here.
Great to have you here. Just want to make sure. And you go by another author name. That's Frater UD.
That's correct. And UD is an abbreviation of the Latin for ubiquidemon, ubiquideus, or translated, the demon is in everything and the God is in everything.
Very cool. This is how slow I am. When I first saw your name, it was Ralph in Stephen Flowers' book in the beginning or something. And I said, well, that guy's on my friends list. And I started looking, and then I realized that you were the Frater UD, and I was like blown away. Like I'm slow sometimes, but I didn't. I was like, this guy's like well known, pretty big dude. I work with Lillian too a lot, so I saw your complete. I've heard of the Frater name, but I just didn't. I'm so slow, I didn't put two and two together. That is the same dude. And then I saw that. But it's great to have you here. We just had Don Webb on, just had Stephen Flowers, and now you. It's like the trinity of something.
Oh, best of company then.
Yes, definitely. Well, I guess give us a little bit of a background. What started you on a path of all this magic? What was for me personally, I just a little bit about my story, not very long. I had testicular cancer when I was 17. I'm fine now, but my dad died a year or so going after chemo and stuff. I went through chemo, I got healed and went through all that crap with testicular cancer at 17. Then my dad died a year or so later, and I started having really weird paranormal stuff happen, from weird things in the sky to ghosts to light beings, weird stuff that I saw with my physical eyes. Sometimes I was partying, sometimes I was not, but it was just weird. So it made me start doing a show, and that's why we're here, because we've seen weird S. But it's great to have you here. What started you on this path?
Actually, it was a little less exciting. When I was 9, I had an uncle who had just discovered yoga. And not that he stayed with it for a very long time, but I didn't know that at the time. And so he was full of it and trying to explain it to every man and his dog how great yoga was supposed to be. And it got me interested. And that's basically my first esoteric book I read, the one he had, and which I bought on myself. And I studied a bit in terms of self-hypnosis and stuff like that. But apart from that, I came from a very unoccult family, really. I mean, nobody was actually actively against it, but there was nobody actually promoting it either, apart from said uncle. And so I didn't start out with magic at all initially. I was more interested in especially Eastern philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism. Well, Hinduism is what it used to be called in those days still. And I studied yoga a lot too, but only theoretically. It was only after about 10 years that I thought, well, about time to actually get started with this stuff and not just read about it, which I did for quite a while and quite intensely. And from then on, it went. I pursued different paths and schools and philosophies. And one day I really hit on magic, essentially the Orson Osgood Spare version of it, sigil magic, and I experimented with that stuff, and uh, it was spectacular results, some of them, and that's what got me hooked and never looked back, really.
Definitely, and got you started on the path, and here you are. You wrote a lot of books. You have a pretty extensive library. I was looking through them all, and of course, I got the newest from Lillowin, and that's what I want to get into mostly. But I wanted to ask you one question about something that I'm going through right now, and how maybe you could give me some advice on it from a magician's standpoint. And I don't know a lot about this stuff. I mean, except from shows and stuff. I study, I grew up in Georgia and America. That's the Bible Belt. I grew up with Christianity. And I think some
Mhm.
of that's true, but I think there's a lot of crazy in there that I don't understand. But I also study Native American spirituality, Norse, and I'm open to different things and love shamanism. We've had a lot of people on about that. And then the UFO thing, that's like, if you really want to get to the truth, go look after that crazy stuff. That gets into definitely for the crazy truth of it all on many levels, from weird aliens having DNA drop offs on the earth or whatever with their experiments or whatever. But my question is right now, and I talked to Don Webb about this. I live with my fiance Christina, and we have a grandmother here who's 90 something, and she's going through dementia. Now, Don Webb told me that he dealt with a situation like that, and it made a lot of people energetically just feel kind of all the time. Like, I guess, kind of just some weird energies that could be bad or whatever. I'm sure it varies from day to day. But here I'm noticing that there's just, I don't know. I'm starting to wonder. I'm not even someone that's into ghosts that much. I like to do shows about them, but I'm not a ghost hunter. I don't go around looking for them or anything weird with equipment. I mostly have always loved the UFO stuff and weird stuff like Mothman and crazy Bigfoot stuff. But this stuff with ghosts, there is something going on in this house that I do not understand. And we've had a glass blow up on the countertop that was a crystal glass that had fruit cocktail in it, and it wasn't cold then hot. It definitely, I tried to look at it from a scientific point of view, but it was weird. We've had a lot of weird stuff, lights going off, and when I stand at the bar, I get chills all over my body. And then the big thing is there's someone in this house that's passing away. So, and she has dementia and hospice is here. But I'm noticing that a lot of this energy is affecting us. I'm having like health stuff all the time. I'm not someone that talks about all my health ailments every day, but every day it's like there's something new going on. Kidney stone, what's going on with my heart? And there's just weird energy here. And I know Christina's dealing with it a lot, and her mother's also here. But I'm just kind of curious if you've ever been in a situation where it seems like it's weird, chaotic energy. And from a magician's standpoint, what would you do to maybe change it or protect yourself or something? I'm just trying to get some advice.
Well, without knowing too many details, the general advice, number one, would be is getting everybody centered. Starting off with you yourself as you're addressing me. Now, whatever that means in terms of personal practice, I mean, some people will get centered by meditation, others by prayer or religious rituals. Others will try to focus on the more rational side of things, or whatever. The point being that. Yes, I agree that a lot of weird stuff can happen, and there's not one size fits all kind of explanation for all that, which essentially you're not actually asking about. You're asking about what to do about it, and I think that's actually the more amenable approach. First thing is actually realizing that there's various views, you might call them paradigms of looking at the world, various ways of looking at things. I explained some of that in my models of magic. So if you're speaking of ghosts or let's say, haunting-like experiences that would generally apply to the spirit model of magic. Point being that if you want to handle this, come to terms with it. I'm not saying to stop it, because it's quite a difficult thing in its own right, but to actually handle it, make it bearable, and especially make it non-destructive. You should decide on which paradigm to work in, and then stick to that by the hook or by crook, because there's little point in trying to mix it. Like, if you say, "Oh, right, I'm experiencing ghosts, spirits, or whatever," that'll be the spirit model. Look at the spirit model, look what it entails, and stick to it. Don't try to mix it up with a psychological model, or switch over to an energy model, even though there may be, some overlap here and there. But in terms of getting yourself centered, it would be a good idea to actually assert yourself within the model you've picked and chosen, and take it from there.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. And I've been definitely trying different things, like even things from reading positive affirmations a lot to try to change the energy, because I know I've had some people, some exorcist type people, who even they don't even they might use Christianity sometimes, but they use other methods, but they'll come in and try to insert like positivity in it somehow. Like, some guy was getting attacked, and the guy started going to a soup kitchen and helping homeless people or something, and then the experiences went away. So there's positive things. I guess that would go along with getting centered and things like that, for sure.
There's another thing, if I may add it. I mean, it's taken directly from chaos magic. This actually covers the issue of banning things. Like, let's say you have a spirit or a ghost or whatever experience you're not comfortable with. The easiest way to get rid of it is to banish by laughter.
Banish by laughter.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you've. Well, of course you can look up some good jokes and start laughing, but that's it. Usually you won't have time for that in such a situation. The point being, it doesn't really matter whether that's a sincere kind of laughter, as long as you actually mimic it, and as a simulation if you want, but do it basically as hard as you can and for as long as you can. You'll tire of it automatically after a minute or two, or maybe 3 or 4. But use that as a ritual of banishing, as it were. And I'd say it works in about 90 to 95% of all cases, at least immediately.
Ritual of banishing. That's through laughter. That's
Yep.
definitely. It's kind of like I've heard shamanic, laugh at what you fear. Well, I'm sure that's more than in shamanism, but laugh at what you fear, laughter. I'll definitely try that more, for sure, no doubt about it. And it kind of brings in,
as I said, it can be quite artificial. I mean, all right, it might help if you actually practice it for a bit. Like in the morning, it doesn't take you long. When you're in the bathroom or something, just laugh for a minute for the heck of it, even if you don't feel funny at all. That's not the point. The point is actually to get your body and your brain, basically, and essentially your mind, into that kind of setting, because when you're actually laughing, you can't really think a lot, and that's and that is actually key to what I'm saying. So maybe give it a try and come back with feedback, good or bad or whatever,
yeah,
open-ended.
definitely. I'll definitely attempt that for sure, and let you know. I just have to be careful here. I don't want to start laughing like the Joker, and then our mom will call the cops. Woo-hoo-hoo. But yeah, definitely.
Well,
So
you'd have to banish the cops with laughter as well, then.
yeah, yeah, we'll definitely fit it. I could do it. I could do it. I just have to manage it and not, do it the right way. But don't let the trickster come through. But maybe he might. So you never know. But so Dath magic, Daath. That's about the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, and Darth being the you might say invisible Zephira. However, that's not really my personal, let's say, area of expertise. Talking about the book you mentioned, I mean that Darth magic was actually introduced in that form by my co-author and friend Harry Allenstein. He's into that a lot. Essentially, Darth is located where in other traditions, including the Tree of Life type of Kabbalah, you'd locate the abyss. So basically, that's what Darth is supposed to be all about, really, and about magic deriving its impulses from the abyss, meaning something that's really outside of our common mindset and our ecology of emotions and thoughts and concepts.
And definitely, when is the Kabbalah tree like similar to the Norse tree on any level? They seem kind of similar. Is there a similarity?
Well, that's a very moot point. You'll find people will totally agree with that, and then you'll find people who would rather go to war than than
Yeah.
ever concede that point. They're different traditions. Let's put it this way, and obviously the Kabbalah is a Jewish tradition, and you might also say that what we are typically familiar with in the West is what I'd say Western esoteric Kabbalah, which is not at all the same thing as the really traditional Jewish Kabbalah as it developed in the 12th and 13th century in the south of France.
I know with Stephen, and we don't have to get into this too much unless you want to. I know there was something I saw in his book that kind of threw me for a loop about weird Jehovah Thor connections, and I was just like, "What?" And I actually searched some of that stuff out, and there were people having discussions about it that were kind of, strange. I was like, I never kind of thought that was even possible, but it's interesting to think about, regardless, for sure. But
It's actually not that seldom. I mean, because if we talk about occultism, whatever that actually may mean, what it certainly always means is a lot of syncretism. Let's people trying to well, maybe unify even, but certainly draw from different systems and comparing things and saying, well, Zeus, that's Jupiter. Well, that's fairly obvious because the Romans took their gods mainly from Greek culture. But is that can you equate that to Jehovah in the Torah, or can you not? Is that Odin, or is it not? And what about Shiva and Shakti and Vishnu and this, that, and the other? So you see a lot of that going on, and so for many people, it's really quite a hodgepodge of different cultural elements drawn from well, whatever suits them, really.
definitely, I understand what you mean. It's definitely fascinating to think about for sure. Well, when it comes to the Kabbalah and stuff, I mean, it ties into angels, right? I mean, that seems like kind of like the basis. Where do they fit into this? I mean, that's what these beings.
Yes, but that's because well, we're into what I call the spirit model, which is probably the oldest form of magic developed. I mean, historically speaking, we can't be totally sure of that, but there's a strong indication making this very plausible. Um, Essentially, the spirit model says, well, well, there's the world as we know it, like you and I, and including our high tech, like us communicating via Skype at the moment, and the computers and this, that, and the other. Uh, but that's well, the world as we know it, and then there's another world, usually invisible, or at least invisible to most people, or invisible most of the time, except under certain conditions or talents or whatever, inhabited by other entities, which you could generally call spirits. That's what shamanism was about, for instance, or at least most of it. Um, and now humans being what they are, they like to systematize things and put patterns onto stuff and or recognize patterns or invent them, whatever. And basically angels and demons or spirits, or call them little people, or whatever. There's, basically every culture we know of has had them at one point or another. And uh, in a more Christian culture, you'll have a hierarchy of angels and even a hierarchy of demons. Well, there is Satan and the hellish demons, the hounds of hell and whatever. And especially in the Middle Ages, which was actually the time when the, at least formally, traditional Kabbalah really was developed. People were full of this kind of hierarchies they'd impose or maybe detect within the spirit world. And the angels in Kabbalah the Kabbalistic tree of life are basically part and parcel of that.
And one of the big experiences that I've had a lot of times, and is I've seen beings of light. I've seen two leave my house once at a lake near here when I lived on the lake, Silver Lake, and completely sober. I don't even think I was on tobacco or anything. And I went outside and saw two beings of light as if they'd been in my house, and they left and flew straight up. And I've seen them more than once. I've seen them in the heavens. I've seen one flying through the sky like Superman. And I know shamanism and stuff and different things mention shining ones and beings of light, but I guess my thing has always been, why the heaven am I seeing this? Am I dying? There was times where I'm like, am I dying? And I'm starting to see the spirit world. I haven't died yet, but I'm sure I will eventually, like everyone. But it sounds like, well, I know the Kabbalah is like states of consciousness, so I guess I'm wondering, maybe I'm hitting some certain states of consciousness that allow you to see that. And I guess if you could talk about the consciousness aspect of it, and in your studies and different stories you've heard of experiences, have beings of light ever come up on any level?
Well, that moves us from the spirit model proper to what I call the psychological model of magic, where let's put it this way: in the spirit model, to conduct magic, to actually achieve magical effects, be they of protection or attack or healing or whatever. You'll communicate with spirits, and actually you'll let them do the work for you. By charging them to do it, or by asking nicely, or offering sacrifices or whatever. What you're talking about now is states of consciousness, and as I said, there is some overlap in shamanism that plays a very important role. Uh, Put in a simple manner, you'd say, well, there's the ordinary state of consciousness, which is basically our everyday way of life, when we are more or less conscious. Well, all right, we know that we have some not or less conscious phases, except for example during sleep, and especially if we dream. But then there's also what in psychology is usually called trance work, where you actually try to get into a different kind of consciousness. There's various techniques for that. Some of them involve drugs, or may involve drugs. Others may involve, good old monasteric things like sensory deprivation, or chanting mantras, or doing meditative work. There's excitatory trance work, or there's more sedating trance work. And once you achieve, that's the whole point, once you achieve a different type of consciousness, let's say, well, an altered kind of consciousness, that's one of the common terms, uh, then your perceptions will change as well. And that's when you actually might get to see have visions of, let's say, spirit people, or visions of patterns governing the universe, or your personal life, or the life of a patient, or where you might have revelations concerning the health of someone, or of some jeopardy somebody else may be in, or you yourself even, premonitions or clairvoyance or whatever. That is a question of proper, I would say, trained trance work. Trained is important because if this happens, on and off haphazardly, uh, you basically have no control over it. And well, as you said about laughter and letting out your inner joker when the cops come, that may actually not be recommendable, to put it mildly. And
Yeah.
same with all the states of consciousness, and that's what shamans actually do. They train this a lot. Shamans who work with drugs or entheogenes, they are called. These are drugs usually has hallucinatory drugs like ayahuasca or whatever, uh, which will. That's why they call them entheogene, which will make you help you perceive divine or let's say spirit type of beings or patterns, energies, and so on. And but many shamans actually don't do that. They don't use drugs at all. They use trance techniques like dancing for 3 days, or like the indigenous American Indian sun dance, for instance, uh, which you usually do for 3 days on and off. I mean, occasionally you feel like you're dropping dead on the ground with exhaustion, and
Yeah, that's me. Day
yeah,
one.
and then okay, everybody does really initially, and then after you've recovered, you stand up and you go on again, and that is one way of achieving a very very strong trance, and or you might say an altered state of consciousness, which is then when you might see your ancestors or might hear them. Doesn't have to be just a seeing experience. It can be auditive. It can be even smelling them or tasting them or whatever. Uh, You'll know what I mean when you once you experience it that way. Not everybody does, so it's hard to explain. Like try to explain how milk tastes to someone who's never tasted it. Basically, it's impossible. But once you've both tasted it, you can speak about it. That's what I mean. And
Yeah.
so, when you're asking why is this happening to me, why am I seeing these, let's say, shiny beings? uh, well, your best bet would be actually to ask them.
Definitely. And then,
Get it,
yeah.
get into conversation with them, and I mean seriously. But just like you're talking to your neighbor or your kids or your aunt or whatever. Uh, don't be shy. Maybe okay, you could do it silently, so you don't have any witnesses around you saying he's gone crazy.
Yes.
But uh, best to do it when you're alone, undisturbed, and you have some time for that. And try and uh, well, convoke them again, and even if it's only in your so-called imagination, and then get into a relationship and ask what it's all about. That's what shamans do essentially.
Definitely, and I've had some telepathy kind of things with them that I need to do it more often. You're right, though, but I have had some things where I've wondered if it's like a telepathic kind of situation, and I've had things lately. My dog passed away not too long ago. Man, that sucks so much. I love that dog so much. I have
Of course.
conversations with him now every day. I try to at least like I love you, Jack, and not anything too intense, but in case he's still here, because I've seen something run by in the corner of my eye. Maybe he's just visiting. Maybe it's something else. I don't know, but
What do you mean? What do
definitely
you mean in case he's still here? If you were talking to him, he is here. That's it.
yes, yes. I
Maybe
believe
only
he's still
maybe
connected.
just for you, but who cares?
Yes, I think there's something to it for sure. I think there's a connection there for sure, and hopefully, when I croak, he'll be there too, and we'll go somewhere, another planet, a utopian planet, maybe. But
What's
but
what you're wishing for?
yeah, that's true for sure. That might be too much. That might,
Name me one utopia that didn't turn into a dystopia at the
yeah,
end. So be careful.
utopian on a reptilian squid planet.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Something
and,
bad.
and 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 meet Lovecraft there, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you have different authors or people in various fields in your book discussing these different subjects. What can you tell us about some of them and what made you, who are some of these people? Harry I, Eilenstein, Joseph Netsch. There's a bunch. So I mean, it's basically different authors given chapters, right?
That's right. And basically, what unites or united us. I say united, past tense, because Josef Knecht, which is of course just a writer's name, his real name is another one. He passed away last year, so before the English edition of our mutual book was out, unfortunately. But we're four authors to this book, and we were all part of the Bonn group, or workshop for experimental magic, which we set up in the early 1980s in Bonn, Germany, where I happened to have an esoteric bookshop at the time. And we worked together for quite some time. Well, as I said, experimental magic, that's what it was all about. We're about something like a dozen members, give or take a few, and our agenda was actually, we came from different traditions. Some were totally inexperienced, as I myself was at the time, not in esotericism, but in terms of practical magic. I just discovered it for myself. There were other people there who'd been doing that for decades already, and some in between, and so on. So we didn't have a hierarchy. It was utterly democratic. There was no leader to it, no one calling the tune, and so we decided on different topics we wanted to investigate, like Golden Dawn type of magic, of planetary magic, invocations, or evocatory work, or working with the elements, and doing divinations and stuff like that. And the four of us met some years, 3 years ago again, um, and then we decided to write this book together. So that's how it came about. And we're
And I
totally
know,
different, as you can see. Actually, if you look at the different chapters by different authors, you can see we have totally different approaches and totally different biographies as well.
definitely. And I noticed that Harry did a telepathy chapter, and that's something to learn more about for sure. That I've read some about it in the past, but I don't know a lot about it. But I definitely find it interesting, and that could come in handy with communicating with these kind of beings, I'm sure, because that's probably a way that they, communicate in a lot of different ways with telepathy and everything. And I know I've had a few DMT experiences a long time ago, and that is my preferred because all the other stuff is too long and I'll freak out and think I'm dying. So with DMT, at least it's real fast and you still get to have the fun. But no, during
Yeah.
DMT, no, during the DMT experience, I saw really weird writing on the wall, and I got up and felt it with my hands, like, how is this here? And it really was like some strange, I don't know what it was, but it looked like something from Lord of the Rings or something just appeared like on the wall from D&T. There were some golden balls of light situations, but I definitely, that would be my preferred, but I just haven't come across it in a long time. But it's definitely, I know that's a component of ayahuasca. I know too, DMT, right? That's a big
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's kind of like the same thing. But so with telepathy, that is that between humans or just with other beings? That could be either or, right?
Well, there's those who would say that if you communicate with, say, spirits, that's however you define them, meaning disincarnate entities, or not readily visible, relatable entities. If you communicate with them, it will usually be within what's called your inner ear. So, and that and one way of expressing or naming or tagging this is, of course, would of course be telepathy. Um, there's other approaches to it. I think telepathy is a bit of a narrowed kind of definition for that sort of thing. Harry, on his part, he has expanded on this quite significantly, and that's in the book as well. And so his is not the regular traditional type of telepathy as, let's say, defined by parapsychological research scholars. But it's really more about communicating with the other world. And so if you want to call that telepathy, I'm fine with that. Harry is fine with it too. So a lot of his magic is actually involves just that kind of approach.
It's definitely fascinating for sure. I had wondered if I'd just seen those beings because maybe the Great Spirit or whatever was trying to alleviate some fears about death, because some of those may be us without our bodies. I don't know 100%, but that's one of my theories, that that's what kind of what we are, is these weird, energy beings, because energy never dies according to science. So perhaps we're just like weird energy glowy aliens is what I think. Personally, for me, that may be a truth to that, as weird as it is. But I know I always bring up Ron Howard's Cocoon with the little glowing people in the swimming pool and the old people. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's pretty weird by Ron Howard, a weird old movie with Steve Guttenberg.
Yeah, long ago.
yeah, yeah, that's an interesting one. So, Wham, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nope. I'm just sitting back and enjoying this.
Okay, that's fine. Well, please, anytime you want to, it's okay. There may be there's storm situation. I should be okay, but if for some reason I drop, you'll and I don't answer, that's where I went. But we should be okay. I hope. I'm trying to stay positive, but it is real black outside for sure.
Right.
But no problems, no problems so far. So I mean, you've been writing books for how many years? Like forever. You have like your own library. You got Nick Redfern beat, and he pumps out books like Terminator.
I'm working on my book number 45 at the moment, if that's an indicator. And yes, I started out writing books in my, let's say, late 20s, early 30s, and I've been going at it ever since. That's true.
Definitely, you got a gift for it. I have some that I wrote, and I haven't wrote any in a long time. But I'm trying to get back in that phase. But I do have a few on Amazon about Bigfoot. It's mostly just written interviews with people about UFOs and Bigfoot, and just transcripts from the show. But it's hard to get back in the saddle. My biggest weakness is kind of editing and stuff. Like, I suck at it. But the content and imagination, I got that beat for sure. But yeah, it's just getting into the chair and handcuffing myself and doing it. The discipline. Hopefully I will again. But yours is definitely impressive, no doubt about it. Lillowin, I've worked with them for years. I enjoy them a whole lot, Lillowin, and they just sent me your book and some others for some other guests to come on from Lillowin Books. Is that your main publisher, Lillowin?
In America, yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. And well, I guess when it comes to, we talk about all kinds of different things on the show, but in your experiences with all this, is paranormal experiences something that's come up with you personally that you've had or anything?
Yes, but not naturally. In terms of, I didn't grow up with a clairvoyant aunt or a grandmother who would initiate me into cartomancy or anything of that sort. Basically, I read about stuff and then I experienced stuff. I tried out stuff too, and then, of course, once you get into magic and you actually experience the effects of magic, whatever they may be, a lot of that just is plain out of the world, as it were. And yes, you could definitely assign a lot of that to parapsychological research, if you want, or parapsychological, depends on which mindset you're applying there. And from stuff like telepathy proper, or in the traditional sense, to manifestations, or what is magic really about? One common definition is actually bending the arm of chance, making events occur against all probable odds. And yes, as I said, if you get into magic and I mean, really into magic, seriously into magic, then it'll actually become part and parcel of your daily life.
Definitely. One thing I've noticed, it seems like with me, I'm sure this is with other people because they call it shamanic deaths. And a lot of times it's when some kind of tragedy happens or you survive a health issue. Like with
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
I had testicular cancer. I lost one at 17, woke up, heard that, and cried. Like, what? I lost one. And then, of course, still kicking. But that seemed to open up my senses. Maybe it was just so much suffering, it opens your senses. And it seems like, I mean, I know you have the whole story with Odin and hanging upside down, taking out the eye. For me personally, I'm sure others, it seems like that's something that does kind of open it, heightens your powers or something, just that suffering for some reason, which to me, it kind of sucks, but there seems to be truth to it. But at least there's a bonus, right? But I don't know if that's for everybody. But me personally, definitely, there's something to that for sure. And I know you mentioned Alistair a lot. And I know there's some invocations he did with lamb, and I don't know exactly what that was, but I'm sure I know you've heard that story where he invoked that lamb, that weird kind of creature that looked kind of like an alien gray or something strange. I don't know what it
yeah,
was,
yeah.
but personally, what did you think about that story, and what did you think that possibly was?
Well, if you look into Aleister Crowley seriously, I mean, I've written a biography of his, so I guess I'm somewhat qualified to say.
Yes.
You'll have to take everything with a huge grain of salt. I'm not saying that he made up any of this stuff. He certainly made up some stuff. That's for sure. Um, but on the other hand, that's marvelous about him. I mean, he's a very critical and rational observer of things, and so yeah. Let's put it this way: people who do evocation magic or evocatory magic, they will experience things like that, like he described in his lamb evocation, and I mean that's what evocation is really about. You know, making something appear to the as the Crowley said, to the consistency of thick fumes, which I think is a bit of a turn off because personally I think it should be fairly more concrete than that. But okay, whatever. Um, and so that's what you actually do when you do demon magic to some extent, or evocation magic. You know, classically you'll have your magical circle, which is for your own protection, and outside of the circle you may have a triangle, and that's where the demon is supposed to appear if your operation works out. And the shamanic approach is different. There are people who will conduct what they call spirit journeys, like get into a trance or an altered state of consciousness or a shamanic state of consciousness, whatever you would like to call it. And then they would meet such entities there and converse with them, even fight with them occasionally. Just for a minute, if I may, returning to that thing about the shamanic death. Yes, that's a common trope within shamanism, that lots and lots of shamans have told stories about how they actually never wanted to become shamans, but then they almost died for some reason. They were extremely ill or hurt, for a hunting accident or whatever, and that actually changed their lives. Usually, they were also healed by a shaman, male or female. Actually, there's more female shamans around than male, but hardly ever anyone reflects on that. And then very often, that's another common trope, they will become, students of said shaman and take up their torch later on. But the point, the real thing about it is actually that it's an existential crisis which you go through. Not everybody does, as you pointed out before, and during such an existential crisis, whatever that may entail, and that's very individual. I mean, you might simply, just by common parlance, lose your mind, and that's it for a while. and then later on you might return after having regained your mind or your former mind, but chances are you won't be the same person anymore because of that experience. It's like out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. They tend to change our mindset quite dramatically. And shamans basically are professionals who will do that on a regular basis. Non-shamans don't, and generally speaking shouldn't either, because it takes a lot of training and control, or it takes a lot of training to achieve control over this kind of experience. And the same goes for evocation magic, which is why in traditional Western magic, people keep warning you off about it, saying don't do this because, and Alistair Crowley actually has when he was in the Sahara with Victor Neuburg, he had this incident where Crowley was sitting basically as the medium for the demon to be evoked. He was sitting in the triangle, in the drawn in the sand, and then he tried to open up that triangle by shoving sand on the lines in order to get out and get at poor Victor's neck. That kind of thing is what traditional Western magic is full of, telling you, well, demons aren't your friends, and they're not nice people, and they're dangerous, and this and that. And not everybody agrees. There's different traditions to that as well, but that is one common thing you'll encounter when you dig into classical magical literature. And basically, I disagree that they're always evil or whatever, but they're certainly alien. It wouldn't make sense calling them demons otherwise. And alien means, of course, that they're not human, okay? And it's very, very, very hard for a human being to relate to an alien. That's the whole point about alien life forms or whatever. And trying to put that into a framework governed by, let's say, religious morals and ethics, saying, well, but in the name of Jesus Christ, they can't do anything. Well, maybe so, maybe not. That depends on your paradigm and how well it works, how stable it actually is. I'd say there's plenty of instances where that paradigm simply won't hold the water. But okay, I mean, Southern Baptist minister may certainly disagree about that, and but okay, whatever. Essentially, my view of this is that you've actually got to find out what your own truth is in these matters. I'm not on a dogmatic kind of mission telling you this is true, this is wrong, this is right, this is untrue, and now you follow my prescriptions, because magic is probably the oldest tradition of human culture of them all, and it's so varied. Has been so varied throughout the ages and throughout different, peoples and geographies and ethnicities and languages and whatever, that you can't really put it into one set system of reference.
Definitely. And I know I've used Archangel Michael a lot to call on that for stuff. But I've also noticed sometimes with Christianity, it just seems like you just piss it off more. But for sure. But I know I've always found the, Solomon stuff very fascinating with all that. That ties into Enochian magic and everything. The seals, is that what that's considered? The seals of Solomon and all that stuff?
Well, Enochian magic was actually developed by John Dee and Edward Kelly, mainly Edward Kelly as his medium, you might say, and though he occasionally used other mediums as well, but that's yes, it is very, let's say, it is very look-alike to a lot of this medieval or actually early Renaissance kind of magic, and The Goetia, of course, which are basically, they weren't actually written in the Middle Ages, most of them. They were actually later than that, though you have prototypes of them early in antiquity as well, and in Islam, and of course in Judaism. But these seals are usually glyphs, you might say. Much like, in a way, like coat of arms of the demon folk. And on the one hand, on the other hand, they are mnemotic tools you can use in order to conduct your evocations and to relate to whatever the specific entities you're evoking are actually specialized in, or what they love or what they hate, and what they want and what they don't want, their names and so on and so forth. And this is usually kind of condensed into these seals.
Yes, and we've had Peter Levin on, and I've asked him about Necronomicon stuff. That was definitely fascinating. I know he has something to do with that little paperback book. I'm not sure the details, but there's some kind of connection there with that weirdo, that Necronomicon Simon paperback book, which I have, by the way, and they scare me for some reason, even though they're supposed to be fiction. They're kind of weird, but for sure, I know it's all based on the Lovecraft stuff, and somehow Lavinda was tied into that. I know might have been part of the collective that made that weird little book and everything. I know you've heard of that book for sure. Those that Simon paperback and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's definitely strange. There's some strange story in it I could have sworn that talks about the son of Sam and a UFO in the front of it, like some kind of Ford. I'd have to reread it. I kind of try to stay away from it. I don't want to. I got enough trouble with this Mabus word that I messed around with. I don't need to mess with the Necronomicon. But of course, a lot of people with the Nostradamus Mabus thing, I was just like high and saw the word. I was going to make a heavy metal band. I never did it. I saw some weird paranormal stuff and used it for a radio show. Now there are certain people who will see us. I'm not doing that show, Mabus from Nostradamus, but no one really knows what it means. He never said it meant Antichrist. John Hogue said that in some weird documentary a long time ago, and then everyone said it did. Maybe it does, but Nostradamus never says it means that. I always say it means maybe us, like our own church or whatever. But
well, and then again, who actually knows what Nostradamus actually said? I mean, who will actually read him in ancient French? Starting with that, then there's the question of whether the printed versions are really 100% identical to the handwriting, stuff like that. And then of course he's very cryptical, and every generation has its new interpretations of Nostradamus.
Very true.
And there were several interpretations of his around in his lifetime already. So I mean, it's fascinating stuff for sure. But essentially, personally, I would say it's something that may kick off a train of thoughts and associations and visions even, and that's the thing to go by, really. And there's a lot of misreadings as well, like when they said, Nostradamus predicted Hitler, because there's this thing, he calls him Hister. Well, if you don't know that Hister is the old name for the river Danube, then you might interpret it as Hitler, a Hitler prediction. And others will say, well, yeah, it's both. It's the old name for the river Danube, Hister. Yeah, but it can also mean Hitler. It doesn't say Hitler; it says Hister, which is not the same thing. Yes. But it's anybody's guess, really. And Nostradamus, of course, he's been in the public domain for ages, and every man and his dog is free to interpret him as they wish.
It's kind of similar to the Bible being edited at this point.
Exactly.
Exactly, I know one thing, Judas Priest, Nostradamus opera album. That's a good one. That's a weird one. Nostradamus!
Oh, yeah, certainly.
You're such a strange man.
You want to see me playing it.
God.
That's a good one, though, for sure. they, they have a good one, a new song on their newest album called Necromancer. That's a good one, too. Necromancer!
Haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, look that one up. That's a good one. It's probably on
Will do.
YouTube, I'm sure.
Yeah, they usually are, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. So, Wei, have anything you'd like to add, or you want me to continue? I mean,
What's really weird is that every time I think about something to ask Ralph about, ask you about Ralph, you start talking about it. So I'm just like
telepathy.
Telepathy.
So much for rotten camouflage.
Exactly. You know, it's like I guess if I was gonna, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about the. I mean, I suddenly realized, oh, I know who you are. You're the SEO guy.
Right. True.
Because I work in marketing and data security. So I was like, oh yeah, that's who that dude is. Okay, you know, it's completely different. We don't have to talk about that. I mean, if I remember right, and this has been a while ago, but if I remember right, you were one of the people that was involved in in that whole that ice magic war or whatever that was. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But I would like to know what your definition of ice magic was and may be still, because I've heard, you know, the way this is filtered down here in the States about all that. You hear about 70 things. So if you would be willing to talk about that a little bit, just.
Well, ice magic, okay. I'll just give you a short breakdown of it, because otherwise we'll be talking next week and no end to it. But because you mentioned the ice magic wars, well, let me state here for once and all that the ice magic wars were an invention of Peter Carroll, and the only place they actually took place in was his own mind at the time. He was quite disturbed, I must say. Just by way of some factoid, my German book, Ice Magic, will be translated, or it has actually been translated. We're still editing it, and there will be a bilingual German-English edition out with Frater publishers. I can't tell you when yet, because I haven't actually handed them the manuscript, so they can't tell you either. But and there will be a chapter included there stating my view of the so-called ice magic wars, and there'll be a possibility of downloading all the pertinent documents of the time, and they'll still have to be scanned, but so everybody can actually look up the stuff by themselves. Else, beyond that, there's no set definition of ice magic. Ice magic is actually an approach to well, magic, obviously, but actually to the world at large. And but the definition ice magic uses for magic is that magic means doing the impossible.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
So this is quite different and unique, as it were, because it doesn't tell you, you know, it's about altered states of consciousness, or about spirits, or about formulas, or tradition, or whatever. It is strictly speaking, magic means doing the impossible. Now, is that possible? Of course not. Otherwise, it wouldn't be impossible, right? So then, and starting out from there, that's where the discussion then sets out, and then it gets fairly involved, and I could go on and talk this whole show about ice magic now, but I don't think that will be too recommendable, because it's really fairly specialist, as it were. But feel free to call me up later at some other time, and we can have a one-on-one conversation about that. It's not that I'm shirking the issue; it's just that that it would actually become very, very abstract for a lot of people, and I don't think that's.
I guess I've always been interested in it, because it seems to be. I mean, what I have read about it. I mean, I do read some German, so what I have read about it, seems to tally in a weird way with kind of how I naturally sort of work, you know.
Well, yes,
And
you might be right there.
and so I guess I've always felt like I sort of understood it in an odd way, but I've never had anybody just explain it to me. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, sure.
And who's going to be publishing that book whenever it's
Thion Publishers in Munich, and
okay? All right.
but I don't think it'll happen this year. But and then again, I'm also working. I've just started off that, as I said, book number 45. It's another project of mine. My second and hopefully last book on ice magic will be Ice Magic Axioms, and it's actually on the list. You set up the promo for the show,
Okay.
and Axioms and Maxims, actually, that's the subtitle. But and that will be a bilingual edition as well. I don't know with which publisher yet, but it will. When I publish it, it will be in both languages. I'm translating it myself. I've been a professional translator for decades, so I'd rather do it myself than task some other poor guy with that.
Right. Well, and if you can, you can. You know, if you know the languages well enough, you might as well. You know?
Well, I had to almost reinvent half the German language for the German edition, so it's anything but trivial. But so I'll have to do the same. I'll have to do the same with English in a way, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well, I'll just pay attention to your notices and see when it comes out.
And I saw that mentioned on Wikipedia, and I had no idea what it was. I was like, this is like some Gandalf Sauron wars or something.
Yeah, I mean, I heard about this years ago. I heard about these so-called ice wars or ice magic war years ago. It was
actually quite critical, because the end of that episode was that the IoT, or the Illuminates of Thanatos, which was the Chaos Magical Order of the time, actually lost 80% of its members.
Yeah.
And it was a major. It wasn't a schism, if you will. And from then on, as far as I'm concerned, it actually went downhill with the IoT. I mean, they had other groups like the Autonomatrix, but that's a chaos magic specific historic factoid in its own right. So I don't know how much of general interest that may be here.
Chaos magic, I find that very fascinating. I don't know a lot about it, but we've discussed it before. But I would be a novice for sure. But just the name sounds cool, so I'm in. Plus, trickster stuff, I've always loved that kind of stuff. Does that play into chaos magic a lot? It seems like it would.
Absolutely, yes. Chaos magic was developed in the 70s in the UK originally, and then later on, there was but there was actually a virtual kind of order. It wasn't really existent in a tangible manner. The Illuminates of Thanatos, or IoT. And then later on, Peter Carroll publishes Live at Null, which was the first book of Chaos Magic, and later on came the second volume, as it were, Psychonaut. And I translated that stuff into German, and then later on, Peter and I met in Germany, and we held a seminar, and that's where we formally founded the Magical Pact of the Illuminates of Thanatos, or IoT, and that it was within that group that this so-called ice wars took place in Pete's mind some years later. But chaos magic is really a probabilistic kind of magic. It says, magic is bending the arm of chance. So, let's say you do a magical operation to make an asteroid hit your neighbor's home or whatever, because you're such a nice guy. So how probable is that? So maybe the probability of that happening of itself, hitting exactly your neighbor's home within the next 14 days or something. There's probably 1 to, let's say, 50 trillion against. So magic is about improving your chances. But even if you make a very, very powerful, whatever, ritual or magical operation, it doesn't have to be ritual. Ritual is just one aspect of it. And you better your chances to 1 to 10 trillion against. That's still pretty unlikely, right? So chances are it won't happen. But the point being that that chaos magic was very kind of iconoclastic in terms of getting rid of cultural ballast and
Mm-hmm.
and religious and metaphysical tenets and stuff like that, trying to reduce magic to the basics in a very, I'd say postmodern way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is it kind of, I mean, how does chaos actually fit into it? You take that energy and kind of like make the best of it? I mean, how does that fit in? I'm trying to
Well,
understand it.
in ancient mythology, chaos was actually the place where the gods came from. They were born out of chaos. And you have this famous Nietzsche quote where he says, "Verily I say," in Zarathustra, that speaks Zarathustra, "Verily I say unto ye, you have to have chaos within ye, to give birth to a dancing star. Verily I tell you, you still have chaos in you." So chaos is actually the place or the state, really, not a place. It's not a locality. It's a state where things are still not decided and where they get decided, become decided. Like in electronics, like 1 0, on off, that kind of plus
Mm.
minus, where that has not yet been decided and it's still in a liminal state where it will be decided in the next nanosecond or whenever. And chaos magic is actually trying to source that kind of state and use it for magical operations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely interesting for sure. And I know the trickster component plays heavily in paranormal a lot. There's books written about that whole subject. I still need to get that George Hansen book. I've never read
You
it.
know what? One of the main, actually, most formative novels that actually, went a long way to create chaos magic, even though the author wasn't involved in any way, was The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt. Where there's this fictional psychiatrist who decides not to go by the book anymore, but to let his dice decide on how to treat his patients, and his entire life eventually. And that was, I think, quite a bestseller in the mid 60s or sometime, and that went a very long way to actually impact the mindset out of which chaos magic was born later on.
I looked that up. That looks pretty interesting. I'll have to check that out. I never heard of that, but I just looked.
You'll love it. It's uproariously funny, and that's because you mentioned the trickster again. Because basically, what this guy in this novel does, I mean, he actually acts like a trickster. Here he has all these stuffy colleagues, from the Psychiatrist Association and this, that, and the other, these Freudians or Jungians and whatever, doing everything by the book, and here he goes, and throws a die how to treat schizophrenia or whatever, and it may be this or the other. He throws a die on whether to go and have a go at his female neighbor or not, and becomes totally immoral as well, and exceedingly funny as well, and that's where you might say, if you want to read a trickster novel, start off with The Dice Man.
Well, for sure. I'm writing that down. I'll look for it for sure. No doubt about it. It sounds fun. I know I've always been into coyote and Native American folklore and Loki and that coyote stuff. That gets crazy. Some of that
Hayoka,
folklore.
yeah.
yeah, it's really good. And Hayoka, I've heard that term. My fiance Christina is always listening to stuff about Hayokas. It's pretty fascinating as well, and we may have some attributes of that. But I mean, I don't know that much about it, a little bit, but it's definitely interesting for sure. And I know that plays into shamanism a lot and everything on many different levels. Well, just kind of off the cuff, I'm kind of curious when it comes to. I know you've talked to a lot of people uh, who practice magic. And like I said, has there ever been any discussion or anything with you where something may have come up that was UFO like from maybe doing magic or something like that? Something strange in this aerial in the sky that was odd.
Well, in the sense of unidentified flying objects, I know a few people who have seen such, but nothing in terms of aliens coming out and abducting them or this and the other. Just stuff that is in the sky, which was well, bloody hard to explain. But
Yes.
that's it. But not like flying saucers or actually space ships or stuff like that. Uh, I know there's people around involved in that kind of stuff, but personally, I've never had any contact with these kind of people, really.
Yeah, my experiences have been seeing weird stuff like that, but I don't think I was ever taken or anything. If I was, they mind wiped the crap out of me, and I don't remember a damn thing. So that's. But I've seen weird stuff, and had people outside go, "What the heck? It seems like it's here for you," but but I don't remember being on a table or anything weird or anything like that. They could be anything, you know. They could be space vehicles that we don't know about, or from our own government. I'm open to everything, but I know there's weird alien stuff too. We've had one guy on, Robert Salas, who wrote a book about UFOs coming and shutting down nuclear silos, and he's still in the military, and they let him write the book. This dude's an Air Force captain, so they're getting crazy about that subject lately. Even the crazy Republicans on Fox News, they're freaking out about UFOs lately because I guess they're finally taking it serious, and they're like on the news, like freaking out, scared about it.
Yeah,
I
since
think,
since all that stuff has been declassified now, and so
yeah,
there's plenty of stuff to well, scratch your head about.
yeah, I think they're more worried as China.
They
China
they
with
all
the
they
top.
always are, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. But it's funny. There's been quite a few. Tucker Carlson. There's Marco Rubio down here. They're freaking out. And it's funny because it's like we've been dealing with. I've been talking about this forever. This has been around forever. One thing I want to say, just real quick. Rest in peace to Timothy Green Beckley. He passed away recently, Mr. UFO, and he's been around
Uh,
a very long time. I was in one of his books about who's that weird monk? Wham Rampa something or other.
Lobster Grandpa?
Lobster
Yes,
Rampa.
I was in
Lobster
a.
Rampa.
I had a
Lobster
written
Grandpa.
interview with him and someone else about that guy in a book. That was my first time I
Yeah.
was ever in a book, and that's some pretty interesting stuff that has weird.
Lobster Grandpa actually got me started on my interest in paranormal stuff, actually, in his book,
Nice.
You Forever. I didn't know he was a bloody charlatan at the time. I was only 14 or so, 13 or something. But his You Forever is actually a course on developing, telepathy and clairvoyance and astral projection and stuff like that. So in a way, he was quite seminal for a while, for quite a few people actually, and myself included.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't. You gave me chills. Yeah, there's a connection for sure. One of those synchronicities. He's got some strange little books. I have a bunch of them for sure. There definitely talks about some odd stuff. They're really good. I did like a written interview with another author, and they put it in a book about him. So that was kind of like my first book. That was pretty kind of cool that I was in about with him and everything. So definitely, I know he had some weird UFO stuff. I've read some of his stuff, but I wouldn't mind getting back into it for sure. I didn't know was he really a charlatan, or what was that just like gossip?
Yeah, well, he started off claiming that he was a Tibetan Lama, and then they actually discovered, actually the news agencies, they haunted him, and that fell apart because he was actually a coal miner from Wales, so then he wrote another book saying, well, he was in fact a Tibetan Lama, but he'd taken over this guy's body with his consent, and most of the stuff he wrote about life in Tibet was all just fake stuff. So yes, he definitely was a charlatan, but he could spin a yarn for sure, and
kind of like Carlos Castaneda situation. It sounds like.
Well, yes, there are lots of people would say that of Carlos Castaneda as well. That's true.
I've read a lot of Castaneda stuff, and I actually interviewed, what was her name? Amy Irving, who wrote a book called Sorcerer's Apprentice, and she kind of, I don't know, I mean, I believe her on some level, but I wasn't there, but she was with him, and it kind of turned kind of culty and abusive. There's weird stuff, but it's called Sorcerer's Apprentice. That's a pretty fascinating book that I read.
I've heard about that too, yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed her once in written form, and we talked about all that. But yeah, but he definitely had some great books. I mean, I remember Wayne Dyer, this spiritual self-help author that's like New York Times talking about him all the time. So he had an impact. Just you don't know if it's true or not. Probably not. I don't know. We never know, right? For sure.
Well, the jury is usually pretty much out on these authors, and as I said, I mean, Lobsang Rampa was extremely successful initially, and then in the 50s, and then it fell down. But hey, I think it was Penguin. They still published his books in the 60s when I got hold of them, and so he was still quite successful as an author, and. Nothing compared to Castaneda later on, but yeah. So a lot of storytelling, and hey, this field of the occult or esotericism is full of charlatans as well. So, and some of them maybe even for the good. I mean, read Ramsey Dukes' brilliant article, "The Magus and the Charlatan," where he says, well, very often you're actually, as a magician, you're actually into fake it till you make it. And he uses Uri Geller as an example, but he says, oh, all right, let's imagine that Uri Geller was actually had one single experience where he bent a spoon. Just by chance, and then afterwards he didn't know how he did it and whatever, and then all right, and then okay, he went for all those tricks and all that, stage magician stuff, but maybe one day same thing happens to you, and maybe then you'll spend the rest of your life trying to make it up again and faking it till you make it, and a lot of conventional magic actually works that way. Definitely. That's what training your imagination is all about, essentially. Imaginary stuff, which then is supposed to actually manifest in a tangible manner.
So I know it says we don't have to talk about this forever or anything, but you developed cyber magic. Could you give us maybe a little rundown what cyber magic is exactly? I mean, that's internet, right?
Well, cyber magic is actually applying what I term the information model of magic. And as I spoke about the spirit model, where it's where there are spirits, and they are actually the agencies that conduct magic, and the magician is someone who gets in touch with them and befriends them, and or maybe even enslaves them, whatever, depending on your paradigm, and lets them do the thing. In the psychological model, it's all about your subconscious or your psyche, which actually makes magic come true or manifest. In the information model, everything is considered to be, information. Like, let's say, take a white noise TV screen. What you have there is electrons, in a chaotic state. In order for them to actually, form your picture as you sit here, or film or whatever may be. What they need is information. And information is actually what in cyber magic you try to source and you try to use in order to actually make matter follow suit, get organized by it. And so that is essentially what cyber magic is about. Some techniques of using information rather than, like in the energy model, for instance, rather than using subtle energies like chi or prana or whatever you want to call it. There's very oud or vril, or there's tons of names for that, manas. Yeah, rather than going for that, you actually try to create information patterns which will then be imposed on reality for reality to sort of organize around.
And I know I've read that you studied with tantric masters, and tantric, is that like, I know sex magic could be a part of that, but I know there's other levels to it, but what can you tell us about that part of your life when you studied?
Well, what I did was actually study with I studied Hindu Tantra, not the Tibetan version. That's quite important. I was never initiated or part and parcel of Vajrayana Buddhism. The Tantra I'm speaking of was actually came from Bengal.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you meet these people? Were they just people you came across?
Well, coming across serendipity, synchronicity, whatever you want to call it. Actually, looking them out, looking for them for that kind of contact, and and when it came about, actually grabbing the chance and not running away.
Definitely sounds fascinating. I know we talked to Stephen Flowers about the Germanic, the runes in his newest book, and that's what he was on about. We got into, Norse heavily and the German history of the runes, and definitely with all that. Do you ever fit Norse into any of your system when you do magic? Anything from that?
No, personally, I don't know. I did for a while. I investigated runic magic. Actually published 2 books on it in German, but it's never really been my mainstay. And I must say, Steve does a marvelous job of that, and it's actually due to him that people actually ever learned about in the runic magic scene, even in Germany, actually, where it was still, I wouldn't say strong, but it was still present, where they actually learned about the Elder Futhark, because they were all using the Armanen Futhark, which is reduced later form, dating back to the 19th century. And it was actually Stephen who actually reintroduced people into that to that kind of approach, and yeah, I mean, I sincerely bow to his authority on these matters.
Definitely, indeed, and I know you're a German diplomat's child and grew up in Africa and Asia, and so you were born in Germany?
No, I was born in Egypt, actually, because my father was with the German embassy there.
Egypt, wow.
Yeah. So in Cairo, and not just in Cairo, but no, in Heliopolis, the old sun cult part. It's actually a suburb at that time. It was a suburb of Cairo, and I spent the first 6 years of my life in Egypt. Yeah. Later on, it was I grew up in partially a couple of years in Germany, and then in Sudan and Pakistan.
And what, as far as your newest book, what was some living magic, contemporary insights and experiences from practicing magicians? What is something from it that you'd like to share with us? That something that you remember that's maybe one of your favorite things, or what message that you would like about the book?
First off, the introduction. Magic in a Vanguard Group, the Bonn Workshop for Experimental Magic. Why? Not simply because it's biographical. In a way, it is, of course. I mean, but because in terms of actually demonstrating to people who are working with others or interested in working with others uh, how one could go about this. That's actually what Don Webb in his foreword actually said. Look, if you want to know how it goes, look at the Bond people. They show you how to conduct that kind of thing. With this, well, basically Crowleyan, yes, the method of science and the aim of religion, uh, depending on how you define religion. But yes, the method of science was very much in our minds at the time. But it's also about stuff like the psychodynamics of it and the group dynamics. And once you've got hold of that, and the rest of the book will actually illustrate how totally differing and to some extent occasionally, not all, very rarely, but occasionally even contradictory views of or actually modes of magic can actually be deployed and used to. And what we didn't want to do was just write a book, stories from the trenches. When we were in our young days, old man, young man, we had these and these adventures and stuff like that. What we actually want to do is reflect on what it's actually done to us after 40 years of practicing magic, and that's what these very varied and differing chapters are all about. I mean, there's historic stuff. There's uh, um, a chapter I wrote, Bending the Arm of Chance. When does magic really become magic? I mean, how to actually define it, rather than just, being fond superstition or self-fulfilling prophecies, or there's stuff on different perspectives of magical thinking and experience in magic. And there's also, because we couldn't totally avoid it, and actually it hopefully makes the reader relate to the authors a bit better. Every author basically answered or actually conducted an interview with himself, and in that way it turns into a kind of biography of each author in itself. It's just a chapter per, but except for Axel's. That's why we titled it "The Contemporary Magician's Biography," because his is a full-fledged, almost you might say, classical biography, which is one of its kind, really. I mean, you'll be hard put to find something similar in magical literature, be it classical or today's magical literature. Actually, demonstrating to the reader. How some people actually handle this kind of approach and handle this kind of discipline or this kind of topic, and so I couldn't tell you that there's some favorite chapter of mine. I enjoyed a lot of the others, all of the other stuff actually. I mean, I was the editor of that book for the German version, and so it was my task to actually to get the authors to actually send in their manuscripts and do the editorial work and stuff like that. But and then I tremendously enjoyed doing that for us all. And at the end, we agreed on that. This is the finished book now, and that's when we published it first in German, and I conducted the English translation as well. And then Llewellyn's took up the offer and published it.
And then a Don Webb Fort. You can't get no better than that. We just had him on about his vampire magic book. He's telling us
Great book as well. Yeah, great book as well. I wrote him an endorsement of that as well. It's a fantastic book of his.
Definitely, I enjoy your book as well. It's really good, and I want to look into some of your older stuff. The Magical Shield, warding off negative things. That could help me probably. I need a magic shield for sure. I saw that was one of your older titles. I'll have to check that out. What do you mean? Why magic isn't for humans?
Because if magic, as I see it, is about doing the impossible, the first thing you hit are human limitations.
Okay.
This is very basic, and I'm not talking about psychological limitations either, about mindset and this positive thinking kind of stuff that if you only want it hard enough, you'll get it. Sorry, it doesn't always work that way, to put it mildly. What about metabolism? What about the fact that nobody breathes voluntarily? You don't breathe because you want to. You breathe because you have to. Because if the proof of the pudding lies in the eating. You can prove me wrong in 5 minutes, and you won't, right? I mean, hopefully you won't, because I don't want to see you die right off it. So what magicians actually deal with is stuff that is actually not really within the human context, or the let's say the human agenda. Not if you take magic seriously and go beyond, some uh, you know uh, basically stuff that affirmations might get you as well, to some extent, or that some evocatory effects may serve you with, which they can and do. I know that from personal experience. The question is, where do you stop? And if you pursue that kind of thinking, you will arrive at the point that either you prefer to stay human with all your limitations, or you want to go beyond that. And I'm not talking Nietzsche's Übermensch here, or stuff like that. Though he had an inkling of that, maybe, even though the Nazis abused it later on. But what I'm talking about is going beyond what is humanly conceivable. Now, of course, you might say, "Well, okay, that's for me. That's what I'm prepared to do." Then magic is still not for you, but maybe you'll conquer it. Magic isn't something, that just lies around to be had for the asking. You pick it up like an old, dollar bill you find somewhere in the subway. Uh, uh, it's something you have to enforce on the world, especially if it means doing the impossible.
And I know Harry has a book, Magic and Astrology. I know we're going through Mercury retrograde right now, and I know a lot of people talk a lot of crap and hype that up and stuff. But I think I've noticed personally, there's weird stuff to it. Like, I mean, maybe it's just coincidence. But I mean, what do you personally think? Do you do anything precautions during Mercury retrograde, or you just kind of say, you don't worry about it?
Well, in my view, and I've studied astrology at some length. I mean, I had an old German astrologer, one of the old, really great German crowd. There was a time, I'm not saying this for nationalistic reasons, but astrology at its peak in Germany in the 20s and 30s, until the Nazis came. And he was one of that generation. And he gave me private tuition at astrology for 7 years. And did some studies of my own as well. I wrote 2 books on the subject. So I think I may be bit qualified and in terms of what astrology actually means. And I'd say Mercury retrograde as such doesn't mean a thing. You have to relate it to your own natal chart.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the fact that Mercury turns retrograde, whatever, in regular instances, so it's no real point in hyping it. It depends on how your Mercury in your natal chart may be aspected, and which house is located. Your Mercury is located, this, that, and the other. So it becomes very individual, and so there's really no, in my view, there's really no point getting all worked up about it, because everybody's under Mercury retrograding at the moment. What if your Mercury in your natal chart is retrograde? Yeah, that may impact it far more than if it isn't. What if your Mercury is elevated? What if it's in a detrimental pose, and if it's squaring Saturn or whatever, entirely different story. If it has a trine with Saturn, it might just make things work a lot better actually, because Mercury retrograde is of course a slower Mercury, and Mercury usually is pretty fast, right? So maybe if things are going well, retrograde can actually extend that period of things going well.
Yes.
Rather than inhibit it. So it really depends very, very much on your individual chart.
Yes, my fiance's a Mercury Virgo situation. I have to keep an eye on her during this time. But mine's Saturn. No one ever goes, Saturn's retrograding. Oh my God, no one cares.
Well, I care if Saturn retrogrades because I was born with Saturn retrograde. So.
Oh, okay. I'm Capricorn. Saturn's my bro.
I was born with Saturn and Capricorn and retrograde in my first house because I have a Capricorn rising. So it matters to me if Saturn's retrograde.
Well, of course, and then if you're asking me, I mean, hey, I'm a double Scorpio. I mean, I have my sun in Scorpio and my rising sign as well. And so, hey, I'll have a specific view of things which may not always be compatible with yours.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, yeah. Scorpios, since you'll speak Ralph facts is what you'll do. Ralph facts.
Yeah. Well, there is that. I'll hand it to you.
Yeah.
Scorpio's a strange one. So is Capricorn. They all are, but Capricorn's definitely a weird one too. You got some weird stuff with that. I'm still trying to figure out that one with me. I was born the day after Christmas, 1974, and it seems like Capricorn's like the devil, like our Pan. There's such weird stuff with it that I try to figure out where did they get some of this symbology.
That's
Saturn is my friend. Saturn is my friend. Capricorn is my friend.
Yes, and hey, read the book by Liz Green, Saturn and You Look at an Old Devil, says it all.
Yes.
And that is actually a kind of very dated kind of astrology where there was always either good or bad. Like Jupiter was always good, and Saturn was always bad, and there were good aspects and bad aspects, and either you die or you'd become King of England or whatever. And astrology is a lot more than that, and has developed a lot more. And Saturn, for instance, and hey, I'm a lifelong member of the Fraternitas Saturni, right? Hey, Saturn is a dweller on the threshold, yes, but it's also about initiation. It's about yes, some tough stuff as well. Not very forgiving, true. But then also very enlightening, and originally he was actually a god of fertility.
Well, my experience is that if you do your work, Saturn rewards you.
That's the point. He's
not for slack.
No wonder it's kicking my ass.
You got to do your work.
That's true. I mean, Saturn doesn't give you a lot of slack. That's
disciplinary.
That's out of the question. He's not, like Venus or Moon can be. Luna can be, more or less, happy-go-lucky. Not so. Not the Saturn, typical Saturn. But then again, it depends on how your Saturn is aspected in your natal chart.
And I always wonder, how did Pan get caught up in Saturn? Do any of y'all know that? I mean, I can't.
Oh, that's a Christian convention that came. Pan, Satan actually was actually equated with Pan because of the horns and basically in a lot of medieval paintings, you'll see actually Satan being depicted like Pan. Actually, he has horns and cloved foot, and looks more or less like a goat, right? Yes. And like the Satan of the First Church of Satan, and And that's where the connection comes from. But originally, Pan had nothing to do with that at all. I mean, Pan was a pagan, a god of shepherds and the countryside, and very virile. Supposed to be about fertility, and then there's pan flutes and stuff like that. A lot of stuff that actually got reduced especially by Christianity, the church fathers, and later on, who would equate, of course, heathens. The Pan cult was anything but Christian. Very very fond of the good things in life, including fucking, and so of course that became the devil in Christianity later on. And then that's how Pan came. In that they said, well, Saturn and Satan, same root as basically that's lunatic etymology. Well, that's what they did, and so there goes.
And I know they somehow I read this about the Capricorn Pan. It has a serpentine fishtail, and somehow I read somewhere that they said the reason they gave him a fishtail was because he was caught self-pleasuring, and the gods got mad and cast him into the Nile River and gave him a serpentine tail for the dark unconscious. That sounds like some Christian guilt stuff. They tagged a tail onto him or something, or I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean,
kind of weird.
It's well, I mean, talk about cultural appropriation. I mean, that's what early Christianity did. I mean, they were in ancient Rome. I mean, they were surrounded by pagans, by polytheists. At least most of them were more or less polytheist, and so everything was demonized. Everything that was not Christian was demonized, and so the ancient Roman gods they still existed, but not as gods anymore, but as demons.
Yes.
So people still actually believed in them. All they said was, but the Christian God is the good God, and we're not supposed to sacrifice stuff to demons and stuff. But hey, magicians in that time didn't care either. Yeah, they still use them, and quite a few still do so today.
I always heard demon used to mean interstellar traveler. I don't know where I heard that from, but that was like the original word. They probably made it worse.
Well, the Greek daimonion was actually you might say a sort of inner entity, not exactly a soul, but very akin to what the Christians and actually made to become the soul proper, and as we know it from Christian churches or Christian religion. But something of that sort. It was related to the divine, like an inner voice. And the daimonium, which is the Latin form, was actually considered something very, very good and very wholesome. And the demonization of that was actually a cult to a large part from Jewish demonology, which in turn had a lot of stuff they took from Babylonian culture during their exile.
Yes, and definitely. Well, we got about 4 minutes left. I just want to plug your book, Living Magic, Contemporary Insights and Experiences from Practicing Magicians. You can get that at Amazon. That's a little one. Do you have a website you'd like to give out or anything like that?
No, nothing at the moment. I spent my internet life on my smartphone usually, and I've built thousands of websites in my time, especially when I was still in search engine optimization. So frankly, I can't be asked anymore.
The best place is Amazon, and check out his books and take a journey. If I could, Stephen Flowers, you and Don Webb, those are definitely ones that I will listen to again someday, because there's just so much knowledge and definitely excellent interviews. I'm glad that I ran across you I know you'd been on my Facebook, but I figured more about you from Stephen, and I'm glad I did. It's been really good. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Well,
Thanks.
thanks for having me, and it was my pleasure. And anytime again.
Very good.
Excellent. Excellent. And
Stay
all,
safe.
all
You
right,
too.
you too. Take care and have a good weekend.
Yeah, same to
I-
you.
I'll send you the archive. Take care. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody. You listen to United Public Radio and Timothy Beckley. I read on I Hate Paracast, but I looked. I was trying to find out where they were saying he croaked at. I believed you for sure, but I just wanted to see something, and there was something from old Gene Steinberg. I don't know.
Uh,
But anyway, he said that apparently Timothy had gone to the hospital and then he was at his apartment and then poof, he croaked.
well,
So
that
yeah,
happens. That
I
happens.
know it definitely does. But I wasn't that close to him. I've interviewed him a few times. I hadn't talked to him in years. He was definitely a strange personality, what we all are on our own level. But he was intense, and he always wanted to do a show, but he did only want to do like a short amount of time. It was more like an info commercial. Like Ann Rice wanted to do 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or something like, let me just do an info commercial. He wouldn't say that, but that's pretty much what it was. Just him talking, not wanting you to talk, and him just about all his books, like Flying Saucers from Hell.
Yeah, I got one of his last books about I can't remember, Gray Lives Matter or something um, about African Americans in the UFO. It's a weird book because it's like it's got some stuff in it that's just like weird, and then it's got other stuff in it that's pretty good. It's just kind of like he just takes all this crap and just kind of stuffs it together between two covers and calls it something. It's so strange.
I know Andy doesn't like him. I found that out.
He's dead, so it's over
Yeah.
with. So
Yeah, true. The battle's over. Yeah, I saw that stuff on Wikipedia, and I was like, this sounds like some Wizard Wars from Dungeons and Dragons. All this stuff. I was pulling a J there, but definitely loved it. Good to learn about it and the laughter. I do that some now, but I'll try to do that more often. You never know. He says that works in 90% or something. Laughter.
it does, well, actually, Paul, if you remember when Paul Eno and Shane Sorois or whatever his name is, since they deal with cases of poltergeists and hauntings and attachments that are often really negative, because they're on into that whole parasite thing. That's something, if you remember in their interviews, it's something that they said was really useful in changing the atmosphere of a place was laughter and bringing in as much love as you could to sort of,
Yes.
push everything out that was not, conducive to light and goodness and happiness. So,
Yes. All right, everybody. You listen to United Public Radio. We'll see you next week, I believe. Ashura VII. That's a friend of Stephanie's coming on, and
excellent.
different. She'll be on, and then Kiki.
Kiki, yeah,
Yes.
I got your PDF.
Yes, she's coming on. So we got some lovely ladies with the ancient knowledge. So there should be some good interviews. Stephanie hooked me up. I was having trouble getting interviews, and next thing you know, I got a party of women coming, like nonstop.
You love that.
I love it. And then I was like, at first I was like, this is a sausage party. I need more women. Now I'm like, there's so many women. I need more sausage. But that's fine. So we'll have some more men coming on later in the summer. But we have a lot of eclectic, smart women coming, and we'll have a great interview. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Webb. Thanks, Joe. And thanks to Ralph. Everybody have a good weekend. Loki starts Wednesday. I can't wait for that on Disney with Tom Hiddleston. That's going to be good. I like him. He's a weird, good actor. So he's pale too. So that's always a plus. All right, everybody. Have a good weekend. Goodbye. Good night, everybody. Jojo, don't be a hero. Don't bring your guns to town. Jojo, don't be a hero.